Why is it so easy to sit on the sidelines when history is moving right past? The search for historical heroes often misses the people who simply watch from the balcony while the world changes. This look at Italian cinema, published on 8 July 2026, skips the revolutionaries to find the cowards and the distracted observers. These films show that during times of massive change, most people are more preoccupied with their own small desires, money, sex, or comfort, than with the fate of their country. It is an observation that feels particularly pointed now, suggesting that the most honest way to understand a political crisis is to watch the people who refuse to join it. Written by Aaron Timms in the Hedgehog Review, narrated for Arva. In this World Cup-crazed summer, the timing of a Manhattan retrospective on Italian historical cinema has felt at times like a sly joke about the absence of Italy from soccer's big stage. The four-time world champions may have failed to qualify for this Mondiale, but for anyone missing the wrist-taped and tasseled flops of the Azzurri, Lincoln Center has kindly offered up its own gallery of Italian ignobles to compensate. No country can match Italy's fertility when it comes to supplying historical analogies for the state of America today, caught between neo-fascist theatrics, constitutional stagnation, the Trumpian cult of personality, and an insurgent socialist left intent on delivery and the revival of a kinder, more competent state. Does this political ragout of reaction and possibility most resemble the Risorgimento, with its ragged bands of Garibaldian red shirts and dreams of continental grandeur, the interwar period's collision of class consciousness and fascism, or the wildcat violence and thwarted radicalism of the Ani di Piombo? The suitability of these analogies may shift as quickly as the weather, but at no point in recent years has it felt as if Italian history will not furnish some instructive parallel or echo to what's happening in the United States today. Lincoln Center's June Festival was clearly designed to capitalize on this burgeoning field of armchair comparative history, dutifully including several classics of the Italian historical cinematic canon, among them The Conformist, 1970, The Garden of the Finzi Continis, 1970, and The Leopard, 1963. The transporting sweep of history in motion is almost impossible to resist. From the moment the first bars of Nino Rota's orchestral score for The Leopard strike up, and the camera pans over a resplendent gated estate, baking under the Sicilian sun like an overdressed cake. But if you watch these films in succession, as I did recently, what's most illuminating about them is not any depiction of the virtue or bravery of political engagement, but their delicate portrait of the baser political instincts: cowardice, indifference, compromise, and self-deception. Eschewing the didacticism of heroic cinema, these films vividly capture the many different ways in which it's possible to do nothing during times of political crisis, to uncourageously sit on the sidelines and watch history fly by. In this filmic corpus, the magnitude of events always runs up against the smallness of human desire. Headlining Italian historical cinema's roster of cads and rogues is Alberto, the heir to an industrial fortune, whose lifelong friendship with the poor and illegitimate Olmo forms the narrative heart of Bernardo Bertolucci's 5-hour epic, 1976. The film's generosity of length is matched only by the depth of its on-screen losses. Amid a rolling tableau of hangings, lynchings, infanticides, and filial disappointments, as workers scythe the fields under the cloud of Mussolini's gathering technological and political revolution, and grim little kids in rags roam from village to village, crying fascisti, comunisti, Robert De Niro plays Alberto as a kind of frozen liberal, caught between responsibility and desire, but incapable of fully prosecuting either. Reluctantly assuming his duties as the padrone of the family estate following the death of his father, Alberto remains both weak and vain to the film's end, his irresolution emphatically unredeemed by any compensating kindness or sensitivity. Unlike in the Yeats poem, here the worst, not the best, lack all conviction. Alberto's best friend, Olmo, Gerard Depardieu, endures his company more out of necessity than affection. His wife Ada, Dominique Sanda, a stylish mondaine, leaves him because he has neither the strength of character to live as a true bohemian, nor the bravery to stand up to the cruelty of the local blackshirts. And in the film's climactic scene, which sees him trumpet his belated dismissal of the state's universally reviled fascist foreman to a deserted town square, his epiphonic moment of resolve arrives too late to do any good. "Coward," Otto repeats to herself, watching Alfredo stand unmoved at the scene of a murder. History in 1900 unfolds as a sequence of opportunities not taken, immobilizing trade-offs between security and valor, and uncorrectable injustices. Its arc is long, but it bends toward more of the same. In the film's final frame, we see Alberto and Olmo wrestling as old men with the same intensity they used to bring to their boyhood skirmishes. Does the dialectic of history lead to synthesis, a new beginning, or only return to childhood? If 1900 suggests one version of an answer to this question, Senso, the 1954 film that established Luchino Visconti's reputation as Italian cinema's leading historical sensualist, proposes another. Here, revolutionary idealism comes apart in the face of sexual desire, and the struggle for freedom unfolds as much between the legs as on the streets.
The film is set during the Italian-Austrian War of Unification, when Italy battled the Austrian Empire for control of Venice and the Papal States. A married Venetian countess sells out her cousin, a pro-independence radical, after falling in love with a handsome young Austrian officer, abandoning her country, her marriage, and her principles in the process. The countess uses the officer for sex. The officer uses the countess for money, claiming he needs a small fortune to pay the army doctors to fake a medical notice that will earn him a discharge from active duty. The depth of his exploitation of the infatuated countess's affections becomes clear when she pays him a surprise visit in the town where he is garrisoned, only to find him drunk and in the arms of a prostitute. Humiliated, she denounces him to the Austrian army, and he is sentenced to death for desertion, while she is left to wander the city streets. Tragic surrender to the senses appears as a leitmotif too in Lena Wertmüller's Love and Anarchy, 1973, in which an anarchist on a mission to assassinate Mussolini becomes embroiled with a prostitute and bungles his chance to shoot Il Duce dead. In an early scene in Visconti's The Leopard, meanwhile, the protagonist, a 45-year-old Sicilian prince confronting the collapse of various ancient regimes, pre-revolutionary Italy, the aristocracy, his own youth, escapes the ruckus caused by the discovery of a dead Bourbon soldier on the grounds of his estate by taking a trip to Palermo to visit his mistress. Bruti tempi, Excellenza, intones the estate's chaplain to the prince as they ride toward the city. Tough times, Your Excellency. But in these films, the times are always titillating as much as they are tough. The satirical genius of Italian political cinema is to take history's nobodies seriously, to highlight the background cast of forgotten enablers without whom bigger events might not have reached the scale or taken the course they eventually did. The masturbating teenagers, the sexual manipulators, the would-be political heroes distracted from destiny by the prompts of their own genitalia. A comically narrow set of choices governs the behavior of these minor characters through the convulsions of history: naivety or cynicism, treachery or capitulation, the reversion to childhood, or the hyperextension of a giggling pubescence. Anything but heroism. Part of the critique of interwar Italian society that Federico Fellini advanced in Amarcord, 1973, his exquisitely choreographed reflection on daily life under Mussolini, was that Italians were simply too immature, too preoccupied with petty intrigues, and too distractible to develop the moral responsibility to resist the rise of fascism. The leftists in his semi-autobiographical version of small-town Italy are emotionally constipated blowhards. The intellectuals are faux scholarly pedants seeking refuge from the obligations of the moment in academic ephemera. The men of sanctioned authority are either psychopaths or cultural fatalists unprepared to risk their own status to affect the national historical outcome. The teachers are as undeveloped as their students, and the adolescents are all obsessed with sex. Part of the film's savagery and its beauty is to smudge the distinction between child and adult. Under fascism's fetish for hierarchy and rank, lesser divisions between the young and the old, the sane and the hysterical, the virginal and the perverted, all lose their definitional clarity.
In a society peopled with small-time deviants and onanists, it's left to even more peripheral figures to enforce whatever paltry codes of morality survive the tide of greed and bodily fluids intact. One thinks of Mademoiselle d'Ambroy, the leopard's French-speaking governess, forever trailing the nobility in a hapless attempt to impose exogenous laws of rectitude. Mais madame, ce n'est pas possible. The allegiances in these films are always provisional and revisable, and therefore essentially meaningless. The most memorably comic character arc in The Leopard sees Tancredi, the prince's young nephew, transform from a red-shirted radical into an officer in the newly unified Kingdom of Italy's army. By the film's end, he's a committed law and order reactionary, expounding merrily on the necessity of harsh methods to suppress Garibaldi and his band of fanatics. For things to stay the same, everything must change, Tancredi tells his uncle. And in this famous line lies the great wisdom of Italian political cinema, the quietism it contemplates at the heart of historical upheaval. Events and ideas may change, but the farce always stays the same.